it's Michaela here, and I just wanted to do a quick video on my time as a Mormon because it was definitely a big part of my life. A lot happened in that time. I wasn't raised Mormon, but I was Mormon for 4 years, so I'm going to talk about that. So you might be wondering why I would decide to become Mormon if I wasn't raised Mormon. And long story short, I was Christian at the time, and I was at home and I heard the doorbell ring. I answered the door, and lo and behold, there were two very handsome young men. I was 19 at the time and they were around the same age, like 19, 20, 21. Two very handsome young men at my door, and I was like, well, hello. And they wanted to come in and talk about the Book of Mormon, as Mormons do, as Mormon missionaries do. And I was like, well, I'm already Christian, but I mean, sure, you can come in and we can talk about Jesus. And I don't know, would I have let them in if they weren't hot? Probably not. It's questionable. So that's what got me in the door, or got them in the door, was one of them in particular. They were both handsome, but one of them in particular, let me tell you, he was like a all-American football star. Like, he had that look, like a Bachelor, like the show The Bachelor. He looked like the dudes on that show. Like, he was just really, really smoking hot. And so I let him in, talked about the Book of Mormon. They were very nice. That's the thing about Mormon missionaries. They're very nice, very friendly. And then, you know, eventually it wasn't all about the hot missionaries. I prayed and I fasted about it, and I really felt like it was the right thing for me at the time. Things happened very quickly, I should say. After I became Mormon, I got married like a year and a half later. And no, it wasn't to the hot Mormon missionary, unfortunately. I mean, not unfortunately. I think probably he wasn't a good match for me. But I did marry a Mormon, someone who was raised in the church, someone who was like very Mormon, like Mormon elite. I don't know what you call it. He came from a family of 7 children. That gives you an idea of the kind of family that he came from. So I got married really, really young. I was 20 years old when I got married. And a lot of people, when I tell them that, they're like, whoa, why did you get married so young? And of course it was because, for one, because I was Mormon, and that's just what Mormons do. Like, 5 other couples around my age got married that same year. Like this, I got married in December, and there were like 5 couples between the summer and December that got married, who were like 20, 21, 19, even like one who was 18. So the thing is that Mormons are all about family. And if you are of childbearing years, I guess, if you've graduated high school pretty much, it's like, okay, time to think about marriage. And so I was like, yeah, it seems like a good idea. Like, I'm all in. Whatever I do, like when I decide to be into something, I'm like all in. So I was full on Mormon. I like wore cardigans and A-line skirts, and I followed all the rules, and I was married. And getting married young is, now in my opinion, I mean, it's kind of like getting a liberal arts degree, because it's a waste of time, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, at least when you get a liberal arts degree, you have a diploma and like a guaranteed job at Starbucks. But when you get married young, all you get is either divorce, or you're married to that person for the rest of your life. I feel like it's harder to grow into the person you're meant to be, or who you really are, when you get married so young, because very few people are truly who they're meant to be, are truly themselves when they're 19, 20. Like, I'm a totally different person now than I was then. I was married, and apart from being Mormon, apart from the fact that being Mormon is pretty restrictive, you have a lot of obligations to the church, I wasn't really into being married so young. You know, like if you're married, or if you know married people, you kind of have an idea of what it's like. I think probably 90% of conversations are about what's for dinner, and the other 10% are the wife asking, why aren't you talking? Like, that is married life, pretty much. Except in my case, it was the other way around. My husband would ask me why I'm not talking, because I was pretty quiet. I'm an introvert, but that's another story. So why did I leave the church in the end, and ultimately leave my husband? Well, they happened at the same time. And one big reason that the church no longer jived with me, why being Mormon no longer worked for me, even though I still have family members who are Mormon who converted after I became Mormon. I kind of led the way. The reason why I just couldn't stay in the church anymore was, number one, I felt like the church culture dictated so much of your life. And I mean, all religions do, but I felt like in the Mormon church especially, there's very defined roles, right? Like, you are expected to get married, and as a woman, it's like, you know, make the babies. And if you're not married in your 20s, that should be your focus, is like wrangling a husband. And I should say that it's the same for men. Men who are single in the Mormon church, in their more like their mid to late 20s, and if they get into 30, you know, they're getting into their 30s, they're getting pressure from the bishop and from the leaders in the church. They're getting talks like, okay, you know, work harder, find a wife, find a wife. Like, they're under pressure too. And I'm not saying this to like criticize the church. That's just part of the culture, is they think family is really important, and it is. And so they just really want people to freaking get married. Just do it already. Where was I going with this? Oh, yes. So your life is kind of set out for you. Once you are married, it's like, when are you going to have kids? When are you going to have kids? How many kids are you going to have? I think it's less so now, but I know, speaking to other girls who are still in the church who I know, they felt pressure to have, you know, if they have 3 kids, to have 4 kids. If they have 4 kids, to have 5 kids, because they're like, oh, well, my sister has 4 kids, so I should have 4 kids. There's just a lot of pressure. And so I didn't, as someone who was just figuring out who I was, it came to a point where I was like, I was going to school, I'd moved to a new city with my husband, and I was really figuring out who I was as a woman. And I was like, you know, I see myself expanding in a different direction than like this narrow path that I would have been on in the church. And that's just for me personally. I think the church is great for a lot of people. I still have family members in the church, and I have a lot of respect for Mormons, because I think of like all the religions that I've had a lot of experience with, they're the least hypocritical. Like, they practice what they preach, and if you want someone you can trust, then ask a Mormon, hire a Mormon, whatever. Like, they're very much, they practice what they preach. Anyways, and then the other thing I didn't really jive with about being Mormon was I felt there was a lot of censorship, in that, like, I I didn't feel like I could truly express what I actually felt and thought, because when you're part of a religion, you have to accept all aspects of that religion, right? Like, you can't cherry pick. It's like you believe everything or you don't. You're not really subscribed to that religion, you know? So there were some things that didn't feel good to me. I just didn't like them, and maybe I would still continue to adhere to those rules, but should I say what it is? It's, for those of you who are familiar with Mormonism, I'm talking about the garments. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but I just want to say what it is I'm talking about. So yeah, I did not like the garments, and I felt like if I could have really truly honestly expressed that, even if I still adhered to that practice, I would have been more okay with being Mormon. But I felt like there was just a lot of censorship in what people say. There's always that layer of like, well, you know, we do this because, and it's holy and it's modest and it's good, and they say all the things that they should say, and you're like, okay, I get it. You're supposed to say those things, but how do you really feel? Like, does anyone else feel what I'm feeling? Like, does anyone else feel a little bit resentful or uncomfortable, or just, you know, like, just as a woman, does any other woman feel like it's not fair? Or I don't know, but if you say those kind of things in a religion, then it's like you're questioning the religion, and people get kind of funny about it. And I wanted to be good too. I was a good little Mormon, and so it just felt like I was really suppressing who I was, and my true thoughts and feelings. And that's ultimately why I could no longer stay in the church, and why I no longer wish to be part of any organized religion. Because like I said, I was Christian in high school, and then I became Mormon, and I was all in with the Christianity too. I was Pentecostal Christian, and I was like in the aisles singing, and everyone was, I didn't speak in tongues really, but other people did. And I went to youth group, I sang in the youth band, like I was all in with the Christianity. And I consider myself just spiritual now. I don't want to be part of a religion again because of that whole accept one thing, accept everything philosophy. I want to be able to trust my inner guidance and be able to choose my own path based on what I feel is right. And trusting in some sort of higher power, energy, source, whatever you want to call it. But no, I don't want to be censored. I don't want to follow a path that other people think I should follow because it's in a book or part of a culture, a church culture. That kind of brings me to stand-up comedy, why I got into stand-up comedy. For those of you who don't know, I've been doing stand-up for about a year now. And it was a big change for me because I was never into that before. I was never the goofball or the person cracking jokes all the time, but I've been doing stand-up for about a year, and it's just one part of me kind of rebelling, one other aspect of me rebelling against that time when I was so restricted and censored, and now being able to just say what I want and be who I want to be. Right after I left the church when I was 23, and I left my husband at the same time, I just swung the opposite direction. I got into salsa dancing, and then I traveled a lot. I traveled a lot through my 20s, and ultimately found my purpose becoming a writer for introverts and helping introverts. So I went on this big journey, and I don't think I would have gone on that journey if I hadn't been Mormon and felt so restricted and censored. That extreme pushed me to the opposite end of the pendulum. And ultimately now I'm expressing myself in a new way through stand-up comedy. And I really like that I can say whatever. It can be dirty, it can be inappropriate. I can't say anything, but it's really fun to be able to do that. And one thing that I started to make jokes about right away was being Mormon. I'm gonna share a clip of one of the very first jokes that I wrote, like actual jokes. Enjoy.
So at the same time that I was married, I was also Mormon, as was my husband. This is true. We were a nice, wholesome Mormon couple. We even kept the law of chastity until we were married. And if you don't know what the law of chastity is, it's like God-ordained pool rules for your vagina. Like, you can get wet, but there's no deep diving allowed. So I was Mormon, but I ended up leaving the church because it was just too restrictive. Most people know that Mormons aren't allowed to drink or have unmarried sex, but did you know they're not even allowed to masturbate? This girl's like, I did break that rule, don't worry. But to be honest, I didn't think it was that big a deal. But then my husband caught me this one time, and he was furious. He started lecturing me about how wrong and sinful it was, and I guess I could have waited until church was finished. But he could have waited until I was finished.
All right, well, that's it for today's video. I've got another video in the works for you with a fellow stand-up comedian. I'm really excited to film it and share it with you guys. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if you used to be Mormon, or if you've known Mormons or been religious, please do share your comments below. All right, take care. Bye.